Hi everyone, Drecky here, and welcome to another action cam review. Today we're looking at the Victure AC940. This is a supposedly real 4K action cam from Amazon brand Victure. And to get started, let me first thank Victure for sending me a copy of this camera to review. The link to this camera is in the video description. Included with this camera are a standard array of accessories, 2 batteries, a waterproof case, a remote, and several mounts. Pull the camera out of its waterproof case and you'll see that it's still waterproof. And actually that's what interested me about this camera. It can be waterproof without an external case up to 8 meters. That's a feature typically found in high-end action cameras, and even the waterproof doors on this camera are fairly well made. They're very stiff and difficult to open, which reassures me that they're not going to open up underwater. On the one side you have a micro USB and HDMI slot, and on the underside is the battery and micro SD slot. The camera itself is one hefty camera made out of this chunky feeling plastic and is a little bit bigger than other action cams. Keep this in mind if you have any mounts that you want this to specifically fit into. Because of that additional waterproofing, this camera may not fit into GoPro specific mounts. There are 2 buttons on the top and 1 button on the side, as well as the touchscreen for input. Overall, this is a fairly robust feeling camera and one of the better built action cams that I've tested, and I think that's mostly due to that extra waterproofing, the extra heft that needs to go into this camera in order to assure that it's not going to die the second it goes underwater. That being said, this is a fairly stiff feeling plastic and I worry about it being brittle. For example, if you fall off of your mountain bike and slam this camera into the ground, I think there's a chance that this plastic case could break. So it is nice that they've included this extra waterproof case just for that additional reassurance underwater, or if you're going to be in an environment where the camera can hit things. The user interface is pretty straightforward as well. Swipe left and right on the main screen in order to change between photo and video modes. The settings button is this little gear in the right hand side where you're given a couple different menus, one for video options and one for camera settings. The most basic settings are included here, such as video resolution, voice recording on and off, exposure value up and down, electronic image stabilization, loop recording, time-lapse, that sort of stuff. This camera also has Wi-Fi in order to control it from an external app. Now let's check out some video quality samples. So finally, after several days of rain, we have some nice weather, so let's go find some cherry blossoms. 4K 30 image stabilization test starting now. When I first saw this camera, I was extraordinarily pumped, and let me tell you why. My favorite action cam that I've reviewed under $100 is the Acaso V50X. It has very good overall video quality with bright, vibrant colors, lots of detail, and for the money, well, it's hard to beat. My criticisms of that camera were twofold. First of all, the microphone quality was awful, and second of all, it was not waterproof without the external case like most of the high-end cameras are. Well, when I saw the Victure AC940, I thought, this camera is very similar specification and abilities on paper at least, so maybe it will have the same video quality as the Acaso V50X, with that waterproof case and maybe even a better mic. Well, let me just say it hit 2 of those 3 notes, but it's kind of lacking in terms of video quality, and that's just a little bit of a letdown. One thing to note with any comparison that you're seeing here is that the field of view on the AC940 is slightly more narrow than any other action cam I own. What that means is it's pretty hard to directly compare any 2 action cams side by side. Because if I have the Victure AC940 mounted to my handlebars and side by side with another action cam, it will always look a little bit more close up and therefore appear to have more detail than it actually does. So to try and get around that, in this clip I took one shot where I was a little bit closer, rolled back a few feet and then took another shot. Let's look at those 2 close up. And you can see the difference here between a real 4K camera, the Vantop Moment 6S, and the Victure AC940. A little bit more clearly at least. The first clip you saw was shot at 4K 30, and the second clip here has both of these cameras at 4K 60. I advise looking particularly close at the leaves and the text on the power box. And finally, for comparison's sake, I have the 1080p from the Vantop camera next to the 4K on the Victure camera. The 4K on the Victure more closely matches the 1080p on the van top in terms of detail. Now don't get me wrong, the video quality is fine. The 4K, it just kind of looks like it's an upscaled 1080p video. Now I'm not sure if this is a result of the image processor or the image sensor or what have you, but nonetheless, all of the settings are just a little bit softer and a little bit less detailed than they should be for a real 4K, real 1080p, you know, that sort of stuff. Again, if you're on a small screen watching this and that's your final delivery option, then this camera will do totally fine. And you know what? As I said, it totally hit on the other 2 of 3 marks. Let's hear the audio quality now. So apparently I can choose 4K 60 resolution with image stabilization. This is a sample of that resolution. I highly doubt that it's a real resolution, as this camera appears to even be upscaling standard 4K 30. But on that note, we have to test it, because that's what we do. So look at the flowers, yeah? That's what we're going for. Let's switch to 4K 30 and see what the difference is now. And here's that exact same shot in 4K 30 with image stabilization. We can even take a close-up and see what the difference in details are, if any. But hopefully this gives you a good guide as to what the quality of this camera is like. Looking at the flowers here especially, there's a good amount of detail when you get close up. The colors seem to be okay overall. So here's an image stabilization sample when I am walking and holding the camera out in front of me. This is just kind of like a walk and talk vlog like some people do on YouTube. Don't really see people run and talk vlog, but we're gonna trust that now. Run back to my bike. Oh my god, my pocket is filled with camera gear and it is jumping everywhere. So that was a jogging vlog. 1080p should be 1/4 of 4K in terms of quality, but I have a suspicion that the Victure camera will be about the same, maybe only slightly worse. So the reason I focus so much on 1080p 60 and 4K 30 are these are the 2 primary resolutions that most cameras can film in. Also, I think they're the resolutions that most people use as their kind of standard resolutions. 4K 30, 1080p 60, those are the kind of resolutions you'll see on almost any YouTube video. Whereas like 1440p, it's nice to have. Yeah, that audio quality, chef's kiss. Great. And the best part is the camera is waterproof without an external case, so you can get this excellent audio quality and have waterproofing at the same time. One thing to note though, there is no option for microphone sensitivity, so if you're at a concert or somewhere loud and the mic volume is peaking, unfortunately it's up to the camera to adjust that. You don't really have a say. When it comes to night shots, this camera requires a lot of light in order to get good quality video, or really any video for that matter. Once sun is set and everything becomes dark, this camera's not really gonna see much unless you have a really bright flashlight or really bright indoor lights. This is both with auto low light turned on and turned off. So the end result is that the amount of detail each resolution produces is kind of close to one step down from where it should be in my opinion. 4K 60 looks like 1080p 60 should, 4K 30 looks like 1080p 30 should, and I'm fairly certain that this camera is just upscaling these lower resolutions and pretending they're real 4K. It does make a 4K file, it is a 3840 by 2160 file. The amount of detail is just a little bit lower than the real resolution would be. This is unfortunately a stark contrast to the earlier mentioned Akaso V50X, which has excellent real 4K for the money. This camera on the other hand, it's not real 4K, that's what it comes down to. Real 1080p upscaled to a 4K file, yeah, that seems to be it. And that's kind of unfortunate because if this camera even recorded excellent 1080p 60, I would have a good reason to recommend it. Instead, it's cramming 1080p details into a massive and bloated 4K file, which is going to take up significantly more memory card space than it needs to. And unfortunately, the 1080p files are kind of a lower quality, maybe to make the viewer believe that these 4K files are real 4K, because when you film 1080p and then film 4K, yeah, the 4K files do look better, but that still doesn't make them real 4K. Don't get me wrong, in contrast to the vast majority of budget action cams on Amazon, this camera is far and above better. It has decent color balance, it has good exposure, it has bright and vibrant colors. It just is lacking those details that make it real 4K, and when it's sold as a real 4K camera that's 20 megapixels, here's a still photo to show you that it's not actually 20 megapixels. Well, yeah, there's something wrong there. And you may say, but Trekkie, every single brand on Amazon is lying, and you're pretty much right. It's the case with every budget action cam where if you're spending $100 or $50 or $30 even, just keep in mind that there are limitations to these cameras, and it's rare that they offer excellent quality without some sort of drawback. So I think overall, a better comparison for this camera would be the Vantop Moment 5C. Video quality is more comparable with a 4K resolution that is best compressed back down to 1080p. They both have bright, colorful video, fake 4K 60 with some silly EIS mode, but the Victure wins in 3 key places. First of all, availability. You can get the Victure on Amazon Canada, Amazon US. The second point is in durability, where having that extra waterproofing without an additional waterproof case makes the camera so much more versatile. And finally, the last point is in audio quality. The 5C had a pretty damn good mic, but the Victure camera is a little bit more reliable and a little bit more rich sounding. So this Victure AC940, do I recommend it? Actually, yeah. Mind you, I haven't had the opportunity to test every single camera on Amazon that is waterproof without this external case. Just keeping in mind the limitations, however, if all you're doing is outputting 1080p final files and you don't mind having these bloated 4K files that are actually just 1080p, well, yeah, it's fine for that. Now, if you don't care about waterproofing or microphone quality, the Akaso V50X or the Campark V30 is still the way to go. Both of those cameras offer great real 4K with excellent stabilization, just kinda crap audio. This one, on the other hand, offers excellent audio, decent image stabilization, but just kind of mushy and lack of details when it comes to the real 4K video. Well, hopefully this review was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. If you stick around past this outro, I've got a lot of sample footage for you, including some different situations that didn't get to be included in the review. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Now that I'm talking to the camera, there's a second purpose. I'm testing the audio synchronization after approximately 2 minutes of filming. A lot of these cameras fall out of sync at this time, so hopefully you can still hear and understand me, and my voice isn't way off of my speaking. Resolution test, 4K 30 frames per second with image stabilization. Resolution test, 1440p, aka 2K, 30 FPS with EIS. 1080p, 60 frames per second with EIS turned on. 1080p, 30 frames per second with EIS turned on. 1080p, 30 FPS, no image stabilization. 1080p, 60 frames per second, no image stabilization. 2K, 30 frames per second, no image stabilization. 4K, 30 frames per second, no EIS. 4K, 60 frames per second, no image stabilization.